Thanks, Kirstine. I'm really happy to be part of this symposium. It really fits this project really well. And before I start, I just wanted to thank you for your great intro and kicking us off, and Hillary and Megan for starting off the presentations and actually using Namaste data. It's awesome to see it being used, even though the project's not finished yet. So kudos to them. I also want to give a big shout out to the project team. Just can't do everyone. This is a huge team with 65 plus more people. And I have listed on the slide. I want to give a big shout out to Kim Cressman, Dave Burdick, and also Alice Yates, Grant McCown for really digging in on these analyses, and so many more people. You'll hear from Susan Shell and Kim Cressman actually after me as well. So lots of great people doing great work. There's 21 nerds involved here and 14 Marsh partners outside of this project in terms of agencies. So lots of people. That's why we're a team, and we have an awesome logo just for our team. And sorry about that. So before I jump in, I just want to give another shout out to Will, Wetlands and Water Levels, because we use this data as the backbone of the project, especially the community vegetation and plot data is pictured here. We also looked at elevation and tides pretty closely. So why are we doing this? Well, one of the reasons we are seeing change, and here's a couple of photos of change in New Hampshire, where Great Bay is, where I'm located. And if anyone else has pictures of change like this, I would love to see them. I'd love to collect them and help booster our communication outreach products, which we're working on very soon. And so this is a plot here in that green box is where we established a low marsh plot back in 2010, and it no longer exists as a marsh. You can see plants died, vegetation, or the peat eroded away. And that dashed line here is probably where is my rough estimation where the marsh used to be about 14 years ago. So that's low marsh change. In high marsh, you can see these people are sitting on high marsh peat, can no longer support plants, and so it's died. But it's still firm marsh, so just no marsh or plants are able to survive on this. So this is high marsh change visualized, and this is more of an uplifting photo. Other are a little bit sad, but figuratively and metaphorically. This is marsh migration. So the marsh has the potential to migrate in certain areas. This is, like a foot or so higher than the marsh platform on a log artificially, but it's just kind of encapsulates the change. And it's also another good way to put in my Holly student from a couple of years ago. So this project can be broken up to 3 phases. This salmon phase here on the left-hand side was probably the biggest part, like 3/4 of the project of like data collection, cataloging, and wrangling. So basically just standardizing all together. People have different data sets and different formats, and it just was a little bit of a nightmare, but it needed to get done, and we're glad to do it through R, through Excel, through just human grunt force and perseverance. This green phase in the middle here is the analysis phase. We did analysis at 2 levels, the reserve level and the national level. So because we heard that that was really important for both, we have tools for both of those things that people can use. And the last phase, this blue phase here, is really for outreach. So we have communication products that are not as technical, and we have education and workshops and presentations to do. It's almost like a campaign, which is well timed with campaign season. One of the tools I wanted to mention was this Namaste dashboard, which Suzanne Shull will present on after me. And so I won't go into great detail here. So just it catalogs our data in an ARC mapping tool. If you zoom in here on Chesapeake Bay, you can kind of see which marsh sites are what type of salinity type, oligohaline or polyhaline. And if you zoom in even further, you can see the plots. And we also, I think we have a SET data, which I turned off, but we have that as well. And even just like visualizing the plots where they are in an area photo is hugely important to interpreting the data. Jumping into analysis, reserve level analysis. This is a recording of me from like a couple of months ago, but basically I'm not gonna be able to keep up with myself from the past. I was longer and faster, but we're doing summary. So this is kind of an automated script that looks at every reserve, and it shows you, oh, so I'm already behind, like visualizations of your data over time. There's a bar chart here. Before they were showing like how many plots you have for what years, what species you have. Now we're getting into univariate analysis, but basically there's univariate and multivariate analysis in great detail on metrics like dependent variables that the reserve is able to choose, and hopefully they'll be able to tweak later on. So I know you didn't really follow that. That wasn't the point. The point was to show that we had this tool here that could be used by reserves, and hopefully, and has been by Megan and Hillary. So moving on, so this is actually a result I want you to pay attention to. Honing on Great Bay of the Marshes, I know best. We have a couple of hypotheses here. This graph I like because it's pretty simple and it kind of hits on a couple of these hypotheses. The first one is low marsh to drown out, which is not great English. Apologize for that. But basically, this graph here is time on the x-axis, and then a spartina floor, which is the main low marsh dominant, and then sometimes in the high marsh sprinkled in. You can see that it's declining over a 10-year, 12-year stretch here, and that kind of hits that hypothesis. Another hypothesis is transitions are most sensitive, and this slope, believe it or not, is a little bit greater than this one and more significant. So we are seeing these changes because it's alternate floor is usually 50-50 in the transition here, and now it's being taken over the plots. And the last thing I'd point out is the high marsh will transform into low marsh, and alternate floor is the key low marsh species, and now it's getting more foothold in the high marsh. So these high marshes are transitioning to more flood tolerant alternate community. We did look at these changes with that R script data tool package I showed before for all the marshes. We compiled it, and here's just a simple graph that shows that do we find change in these marshes? And the blue is yes, we found strong change at 29%, and green is moderate change. So basically, you compile these two together, you have 93% of our marshes across the system have changed. We have about 85 sites we looked at. So that's a compelling argument and one that we found with the increased sea level rise over the last decade plus. Jumping into the national level, just want to mention a couple of things here. So univariate, we've done a lot of tests, like hundreds of tests here as more of an exploratory way of looking at patterns. One of the things or a couple of things I want to mention here is the effects we're looking at are time, region, zone, and so many more other things. So we have a whole list of deep independent variables, fixed effects, and then we have the two that I'm highlighting here, like live cover and ambient cover for response variables, dependent variables. And we also have like a list of 10 of these here. So we kind of meshed those together, but I'm just showing a snippet of it. So one of the snippets I'll show is really how's live and dead cover changing across the system in different zones. And for the low marsh, you can see that live cover is decreasing and dead cover is increasing. And we find that same pattern in high marsh, in upland edge, with just slightly different slopes and slightly different intercepts or where they're starting. So the high marsh, you have more live cover typically, so we're losing it. And so they're kind of merging here where these are flipping. So the general gist is marshes are changing, which we kind of knew from before at the reserve level, but we're compiling it together. Going a little bit more complicated at the national level here, we have a whole bunch of explanatory independent factors and response variables, like I mentioned before. We put them into a model. This is like our 50th iteration of that model, which is our more simplified model. We had a much more complex one to really ask the question like, what is responsible for marsh change in the national system? To simplify it quite tremendously, no big surprise, sea level rise rates were a huge component of that, accounting for that variability using a linear mixed effects model. And then salinity was also up there, which is kind of surprising. So like a oligohaline or mesohaline marsh kind of responds a little differently. So we look at this graph really quickly, sea level rise at the bottom over the last 10 to 15 years, and then we have the indicator of sea level rise, which we call ecotone encroacher ratio, but basically it's the higher the number, the more impacted you are by sea level rise in your plant community. So as sea level rises, so doesn't that indicator of sea level rise changes in your plant community. And that is differed across different salinity regimes. So there's just some preliminary findings, a snapshot. Next steps, real quickly, I want to plug this Namaste R2's workshop in Kennebunk, Maine coming up in October 20th in person. If you register, great. If you haven't and you want to and you don't know how, please email me. I'm also presenting a little bit longer presentation at Restore America's Estuaries in October. We'll have a longer presentation of our final results in webinar format in January of next year. And of all these other things, I'm just going to point out a couple of things in the interest of time is we're going to be looking to the manuscript, maybe participate in Mars 2.0. And then I have this this Avengers thing here, but basically we have a whole bunch of national NERS marsh initiatives that have been done in the past, currently ongoing, and probably more in the future. Be nice to kind of unite all these superhero projects together and get like a kind of like a coherent, summarized message. Yeah, with that, I'm going to leave you with pictures of beautiful marshes from the country. Thanks. Bye. Bye.